Good morning. Welcome to St. Mike's, to all of our visitors. Good to have you this morning. Probably at some point, most of us here have heard the phrase passive-aggressive behavior. I don't know if you've ever known somebody that's kind of been passive-aggressive, but if you're not familiar with that phrase, what that typically means is when somebody is maybe nice to your face, but then behind your back, they're a little different, right? That phrase was coined by the U.S. Army in the Second World War because they would have GIs that would come and they would be nice and upfront and obedient to their superior, but then behind their back, they would kind of work to undermine the guy. And that's where that phrase passive-aggressive behavior comes from. I once had a roommate, and we were going out one night, and I got dressed up, and he's like, "Wow, Ben, you actually look nice." I was like, "That's a little passive-aggressive." About a week later, I said to him, "Wow, buddy, you actually cleaned the kitchen." It's a little passive-aggressive. Usually the way we see it with that behavior, somebody maybe, like, we'll say to them, "Are you mad?" And they say, "No, I'm fine." But then we'll get the silent treatment for about 4 days, right? A little passive-aggressive, right? Point being is that our attitude really does speak volumes. It just does. For each one of us, there's a lot of things in life we can't control, in case you haven't noticed. We can't control what families we're born into, as we'll see this week, right? We can't control our good looks that we're given. We can't control so much our intellect, maybe, that we're given. We can control, however, two things: our work ethic and our attitude. That we can control. And honestly, you can get far with those two things. With a good work ethic and a good attitude, you really can. And so for each one of us, I think it's maybe good to remember in a special way just that. We can actually get far just with those two things, right? So all throughout the Gospels, we hear about the importance of work ethic. In the book of Genesis, I think it's chapter 3, God tells our first parents, he says, "You will earn your living by the sweat of your brow." In other words, he's put into our hearts, into our being, the importance of working. In fact, I would argue this is one of the things that can lead to depression when people don't have something to focus their energy on, right? St. Paul is really funny. In 2 Thessalonians, he says, the person who does not work, yeah, that person can't eat. In other words, we each need to do our part. Question, how many years did Jesus live? 33. Do you know that a pope's cassock, the white cassock he wears, has got 33 buttons going down the front for every year of Jesus' life? Of those 33 years, how many years do we know about? About 3. So if we do the math, that means there's 30 years that we don't know about. So what was Jesus doing there in that time? It's working, rolling up his sleeves. We believe that St. Joseph probably died when Jesus was about 20, which means that he spent 10 years of his life going to work every day. Probably had difficult customers, probably, right? And so work is really good. It's really, really good. It's important. They always say that respect is earned. I would argue that once respect is earned, it is usually returned. Once respect is earned, most people reciprocate. It's usually returned. Not always, but most of the time, yeah. One of my favorite authors is a guy named Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about what he calls the fallacy of the American prodigy. The fallacy of the American prodigy, meaning, very simply, he says that a lot of parents and grandparents, they're well-meaning, but they kind of think, my child is the Michael Jordan of the sports world. My child is the Mozart of the sports world. Probably not. Probably not, okay? Less than 1% go pro, all right? But they kind of hold them up on a pedestal, right? And he argues they actually do a huge disservice to their children and grandchildren when they do that, right? He puts together all these studies, and one of the things that he shows is that in every field, the people that succeed the most are not the prodigies. It's the ones with work ethic and good attitude. I mean, pretty much every educator I've ever known and every coach I've ever known would readily admit that they would much rather have a kid with a good attitude and a work ethic than one that was a child prodigy. In fact, that can actually work against them because they get a big head. Point being, once respect is earned, it's usually returned. We have to earn it by work ethic. Work is good. You know, the saints, they have this Latin expression that they've talked about. It's called the aurea mediocritas. The aurea mediocritas, which we would translate as a healthy work-life balance, right? A healthy work-life balance. Here's a question, if you don't mind me asking. When you're at work, are you actually working? I mean, are we scrolling through Instagram and Amazon, right? Or do we actually give them a full day's work? Because we kind of need to. It's what we signed up for. We all have days where we don't want to be at work, most likely, but they deserve it, right? And it's good for us to channel our energy in that way, yeah? Let me just say this. When we talk about work, most of the best work that you and I will ever do, most likely, will never be acknowledged by others or thanked by others. Do you know that at this very point, as we come together and sit this morning, there's about 20,000 cloistered nuns around the world and about 100,000 monks around the world, all of whom are totally 100% in silence. They're praying behind the scenes. People like Thomas Merton praying behind the scenes. Their prayers may have kept this whole world from falling apart. And many of them have done such amazing things. Do you know that the first mechanical clock was put together by none other than a Benedictine monk? Do you know the irrigation system that we currently have was developed by the monks? Do you know that our understanding of wine and champagne came from the monks? Benedictine monk named Dom Perignon. We can thank him. There's a monk who died in the year 1313. His name was Alessandro della Spina. If you've never heard of him, don't worry. He came up with something I think that has probably impacted everybody in this church. God bless him. Up until that point, people were using lenses, giant lenses, to see things. And what he used to do is he would hand scribe the entire Bible by candlelight. You have any idea the strain on one's eyes when you do that? So he's like, this is crazy. So what he did is he took quartz, ground it up, got some leather, got some wood, and he came up with spectacles. Thus we have Alessandro della Spina. That's where we get that name. So if you wear glasses like yours truly, you can thank a monk for that. No credit, nor do they want it. They didn't patent anything. You kidding? You look at any history book, pick a school, look. Guarantee you, most of them give zero credit to the monks and religious sisters that came up with this stuff. Nor do they want it. Nor do they want it. As you've heard me say before, we had what we call Benedictine minuscule. If you're not familiar with that phrase, up until the point of the Benedictine monks, when you would read something, it was one long, long sentence with no punctuation, no capitals, no paragraphs. Can you imagine? It's like a William Faulkner novel. We can thank the monks for introducing that. We don't even think about it. But to them, they're like, look, the brain can't work in this way. What's your point, Father? Here's my point. Most of the work, the important work that we will do in our lives, nobody will ever notice. But that's okay, because God notices.